Yo, what's up guys, WQ here, and I was talking about ego last week, so I wanted to elaborate on that, and it's kind of interesting, the ego questions that can come up. Also, what is ego exactly? We defined it as solving a problem through output. I think it's actually a good definition, but it doesn't, it like writes the problem down, but it doesn't illustrate the problem, right? There's no understanding of what exactly is this. How is it, like, giving an example of it isn't a definition, but it gives such a good picture. So yeah, let's talk about some examples of ego in gameplay. And there's some interesting examples. So two critical things here. One critical thing is that my whole purpose of playing Link to the Past, I've talked about it a few times and I'm pretty quiet about it. It's actually very interesting. Number two is that, okay, I forget number two. So check this out. I was streaming Randomizer. Oh yeah. Okay, I think there might be more to Link to the Past than I understand with my regards to my ideas. A lot of my gameplay arguments and ideas, they're critically linked to A Link to the Past, and I don't know if that is because of the way A Link to the Past is structured, or is it possibly because I like the game a lot. I'm not really sure on that. It might be both. Maybe it's just me, the way I think. Who knows? But I think there's merit to playing Link to the Past more. So I might do that. I might play the game offline. I might do some speedruns offline. It might be good for my ideas. It might be good. Who knows? My ideas seem to evolve over time. So it's like, why give up now? You know, if A Link to the Past isn't critical to this, let's keep playing the game. But yeah, so I got into Link to the Past in 2013 specifically because I was reading forum posts about the old world record holder named Crystal, who was very, like, she was a character. It wasn't a real person. It was a character. Would always like joke with people, cynically joke with people, and very like articulate and very methodical, very what's that word when you cover every single option, and you cover every possibility? That is the word. That's what she was very into that. So I was reading these forum posts, and I was going crazy when I was reading these forum posts, and I realized I wanted to destroy this person, like completely destroy the person, and not that they're a human being, but in gameplay. I wanted to obliterate them in terms of gameplay. So, you know, I'm willing to bet it wasn't just me. I'm willing to bet some other guys had that same feeling. Was it the fact that Crystal was a girl like that? I'm not really sure. I think it was more like Crystal had a bounty on their head, and you want to get the bounty, right? Well, Crystal was fake, but it was interesting because I actually did obliterate Crystal's identity, or I helped obliterate Crystal's identity through YouTube videos in 2018. I think that's interesting. So that's kind of what I mean by this whole ego thing, right? Why was I playing Link to the Past? What was my gameplay in Link to the Past designed to do? Was it designed to get the world record as my original goal? Or was it designed to obliterate Crystal? That's also part of the reason I think I created these gameplay arguments, because you need to explain Crystal, right? You have to be able to explain it. You can't just simply beat the time. In fact, the times were fake, so eventually we realized the times were fake. So you couldn't even beat the times. Like it was a non-issue, and they're not even that good. Like Crystal's PBs aren't that good either. So it's like the times aren't real. They're not very good. What's the point in beating them? And they're like, you know, it doesn't make any sense. So the times are actually unreal. Her PBs were completely unreal for the time period, but they're fake, so of course they're unreal. But yeah, I think it's interesting. What did I really create my gameplay in A Link to the Past around? Part of the reason natural gameplay is so crazy to me and so interesting is because it started to get my gameplay more on track with what works in reality and more out of the Crystal vein. But yeah, the more ego examples, so that's one example of ego, right? I think it's interesting. This is a better example. So In Ice Palace, right before Cold Stare, there's this room you have to pull 2 statues, and you need to hammer a peg, and then you fall into Cold Stare and you destroy them. There's 3 different ways to do this screen. So so there's 2 of the 3 ways are identical, or they're the same like base strat, and they're just different modifications of the same base strat. And people have always known of these strats. Now you can't really say one strat's faster than the other because of how similar they are, and how one of them's like faster in certain ways, but it's slower in other ways. So it's like, it's very, very, very difficult to say one is faster than the other. Another reason why natural gameplay is so powerful, because when I started to judge things about how natural they were, these speed variances, it became easier to determine value in things. So we're gonna go with the strategy that I use that I think is better. So the second way to do the screen is actually new. It was created recently, like a year ago, I think. Maybe a year and a half ago, but about a year ago. And it saves like 10 frames, so it's better, right? But this is interesting. I can't do the strategy. In fact, I cannot save time with the strategy. And so, oh yeah, I was gonna clickbait this video. Check this out, guys. I literally cannot do perfect. I can't play perfectly. In A Link to the Past, I cannot play perfectly. This is why I had the best times. Game changing. Okay, back to the video. Yeah, I can't play perfectly. When this strat was discovered and it was shown to me and someone was like, hey, check this out, I dinked around with it for like 10 minutes. I never once got it faster. And I started to report some of my decent times, and I started to report them to, the people that showed me the strat, and they were like, well, yeah, I got this time, and it's like 10 frames faster, like 7 frames faster than my time. And I'm like, what the hell? I never was able to get those super fast times. And not only that, but I hardly ever got it faster than the normal way I did it, the old way. But everybody else got it faster, everybody else. And I thought it was interesting because I cannot optimize screens like that. I actually can't, like, they would get better times than me. I cannot optimize that screen to be that fast. I can't do it. And it's actually a huge advantage to me. And the reason I can't do it is because it's not practical for a real-time environment. It's not, you cannot reliably do that in real time. It's not practical. You wouldn't even want to do that. So you never go for it like that. So it's actually, the way I think, I'm not gonna play at peak. My peak is down here. This is an average player who plays a few thousand hours of the game. I'm down here intentionally because I actually get better times when I'm down here. I'm actually faster when I'm down here. Because when I play at peak like that, what happens if I go into practice and then I determine this stretch faster because of my peak gameplay in practice, right? I get worse time, so it's not peak at all. This is one of these paradoxes of gameplay that I frequently talk about. This is one of these tricks of natural gameplay that I always talk about. It's a very interesting thing, and it's why natural gameplay exists, or this is one of the reasons it exists. Literally playing slower, you end up playing faster. Now, I'm not playing slower, I'm playing better, and I end up playing faster, and that's why it's faster, right? Tricky stuff, but there's a few reasons that this is real. And I think if you take, now many players, good players, like top 20 players, determine that the other strat's faster, and I would say they're all wrong, because there's a few key differences in these two strats. The new strat that's faster, where it's the one statue, when you pull the statue back, you're very slow. So if you pull it 1 frame higher than the perfect lineup, let's call it 0 pixel lineup. If you pull it 1 pixel higher, it's actually multiple frames. It's also, well, I guess it's not that hard to determine, but it would be multiple frames, right? And then the second issue is when you're sliding the statue left, it's extraordinarily easy to get nudge frames on multiple occasions, and it's extraordinarily hard to do this optimally, right? So if you have very precise, optimal, clean, ideal movement, you can actually reliably do that in practice. You could go into practice and then do some drills and you would realize this is faster. But if you have kind of simpler movement like me, you cannot figure out that that's faster. It will never be faster because my movement is completely adapted for real time, where it's mentally it's adapted, right? It's not like, it's not perfect. In fact, my movement could go down another 20 seconds if I played more. But that's the goal, is real time adaptation. Where everyone else is, I guess they're trying to practice, like optimize like room times, or like trying to optimize like practice. I'm not really sure, but I think that's interesting because they are actually in runs. What's going to happen to them if they do this, the one statue strat, the newer strat that's faster in practice? In runs, they're losing time because you can't pull that statue up to 0 pixels every time. You have to go to 3-4 pixels sometimes, and you get these nudge frames also. So when I do that strategy that I always do, and they do their new strategy that's supposed to be faster, I actually get better room times than them in runs, in high pressure runs specifically. That's what matters. So I actually I'm a faster player because I'm slower. And my movement's slower, I'm actually a faster player. Now this is the tricky part. They cannot sacrifice those technical advantages in practice. This extreme movement, pushing the limits of the game, the movement, those extremities, they don't want to sacrifice them because they're cool or they're interesting. They don't want to sacrifice them. And so if they cannot sacrifice those, they'll never beat my times. It's impossible to beat my times because they're actually at a disadvantage in real-time runs. That's another example of ego, right? Their ego, where they think they're better, they like a strategy because it's cooler, they perceive themselves as faster. Because when you get a room time that's like 11:55 and you get a room time that's 12:10, you get these consistent 11:55s or 11:30. I think that room goes down to like 11:36 or 10:36 or something. It's a good feeling. You feel like you're better, right? You're getting feedback that, oh, I'm better. But if they don't sacrifice that, even if I tell somebody this and they understand, oh, this strat's actually slower, interesting. Even if I tell them that, if they cannot sacrifice those extreme movement, pushing those movements to that level, they're never going to actually get better RTA runs. They can't beat my times. So that's an example of ego, how ego affects gameplay, and that's also how ego determines skill. It actually is determining a player's skill in this situation, because that's happening frequently, right? So what is ego? It's solving a problem through output. So what is the player doing? He's finding the fastest room time, and then that's the best thing, right? It's the fastest room time, therefore it's the best thing. That's solving the problem through output. What am I doing? Solving the problem. Well, I think I'm technically solving through output as well, but it's a little bit smarter. It's much smarter about it, right? Actually, I do think it's partially through input, and this is places I get confused about the whole natural gameplay argument, because in natural gameplay, it's more of a feel-based thing, so it is technically input. Like, the real reason I don't like that strategy is because it's not as natural. It's just not as natural, so it's a worse strategy. So that is, I would say, more of an input thing. But a lot of people have come together and say, well, isn't that output? And I'm like, shoot, I have no idea. So that's kind of why I've abandoned the whole output input thing to a degree. But point is that actually, no, the reason I would be solving it through input is because it would come out of belief systems. That's why. And I would have a certain belief system that would direct me to a certain set of behaviors. So they would too, actually. We would both be solving the problem through input, because you have to solve a problem through input. You actually can't solve problems through output. Well, you can't act through output. It's not possible, right? If you're in an equation, you have to act through input. You have to operate through input, because everything operates through input. But if you solve the problem through output, it's still input, right? So what that would mean is that we're both solving it through input, but effectively, see, this is like, would they effectively, they're solving it, they're using output to determine their behavior. I'm using input to determine my behavior, because I'm in line with my belief systems. Their belief systems, I mean, they're in line with their belief systems too, but their belief systems are output based. So yeah, that's confusing. That idea, though, that I just said there is incredibly profound, and it's incredibly important, and I've never been able to illustrate it. So I hope you guys are able to at least consider that one, because I think that argument, the last minute of this video, could actually change the world. Like, it's just ridiculous. Like, it's just a completely profound idea. Yeah, when you solve a problem through output, it's for your ego. So when they get a 11:35 room time, it effectively supports their ego, right? It's like their ego is big. So the whole point, if the input-output thing here, the whole point is that it has nothing to do with it. It's like the point of the strategy is to support the ego. It's not actually to support the strategy. So something I've wondered for a while. I think ego, it doesn't go away. I think natural gameplay technically solves ego. It can't actually solve ego. That shouldn't make any sense. So I think natural gameplay would just be a much deeper level of optimization, and it's much more flexible. So I think that's why, like, I would still have an ego if you took a better player, because my argument of natural gameplay would start limiting me. They would have a even more complex argument. But I don't know. Maybe it is a complete solution. Maybe it is a macro solution. Maybe it is a true solution. It's very complicated stuff. Not only is it complicated, there's no infrastructure for it. I just completely made up all this stuff on my own. So it's like, it's too hard to think about sometimes. Okay, so the third example of ego is, and as this is watching a player do this, he has the third place time in Link to Pass. It's pretty good. There's a gap between Zelda and him and his gameplay, and there's a gap between Zelda or me and him and his gameplay, right? And I think Zelda's gameplay and my gameplay is very different, so that's why I individually say there's a gap. There's clearly a gap, though. But he's pretty solid. He's like leagues above 4th place, 5th place, 6th place. He's leagues above them. I think people could beat his time, though, and I actually think he could potentially beat my time. You know, bearing a few things that have to change, but I think he could beat my time, and I think a few people could beat his time. So, but none of that really matters. So he recently learned to hover, and this is an example of ego. Now let's think about ego again in terms of solving a problem through output and feeling good about yourself, and then eliminating your gameplay, creating worse gameplay, right? So he learned to hover recently, and there's a clip of him hovering, and I think he's hovering for like 2 minutes straight, all across Moldorm 2. It's just making it look easy. He was in a run recently. I was watching him today, actually, and he fails to hover on PB pace. Well, he wasn't on PB pace. He's like he was one standard deviation outside of PB pace. So if he got very lucky, he would have PB'd. But he was one standard deviation out of PB pace. So he goes for the hover and he fails the hover. Well, why did he fail the hover, right? He can hover completely effortlessly outside of a run. In fact, you'll find that pretty much everybody that plays the Link to Pass can do that, and Link to Pass Randomizer. However, it's very easy to do. Anybody can do it. Literally, people that cannot play Link to Pass can hover. It's that easy. But the technique is extremely complex at a higher level, and a lot of it has to do with this anxiety factor. Now, guys, interesting. I created anxiety because there was things I couldn't explain, and anxiety was effectively a solution or an explanation for these factors. So, why did I do that? Because natural gameplay created that. I needed deeper levels of optimization. That's part of what natural gameplay does. That's why we created anxiety. So anxiety became a thing. To most people, it's not a thing, interestingly. Which to me makes no sense. But it's just not a thing. They never consider it, right? Because they don't think about playing on PB pace, right? Because they're not looking for the higher level of optimization. They're not looking for something that's more natural. So, yeah, what people will do is they'll try to hover. And then there's like 5 different ways to practicing hover. There's hover tests, how long you can hover, how far you can hover, how fast you can hover, there's actually, people have created like, so one person created an application that you could hover. You just do the inputs on the controller, and it actually has like a scale, like a radar looking thing, it looks like a heart rate monitor. And every time you miss the hover, it'll tell you, and it'll tell me how many frames, and tell you all these BS. Every time you get the hover, you have to get like 60 in a row or some BS. But I think it's just all BS because this doesn't account for anxiety. None of this stuff accounts for anxiety. If you hover for 2 minutes, it's not counting for anxiety. If you hover perfect hover the whole way down in practice, doesn't account for anxiety. Worthless. If you do if you hover the entire Turtle Rock Gap 5 times in a row, completely worthless, right? Because none of these account for anxiety. So let's go. What does that mean? If somebody is hovering in Link to Pass, if you don't know what hovering is. So in Link to Pass, if you dashing over a hole, you're not going to fall until your dash ends. So if you dash and you let go of the A button for 1 frame and then you repress the A button and start a new dash and you're holding a direction, you actually go forward 1 frame. So you go forward 2 or 1 pixel, go forward 2 or 1 pixels. So it creates, if you link that, it'll create a hover chain. The inputs to the hover, you basically slide these fingers over the A button. So it's very easy to hover, but if you're sliding these fingers with the A button, so if you hold the A button for 30 frames or 31 frames, actually, I think it's 30, it's 30 or 31. It must be 31 frames. You fall because you dash. If you don't repress the A button for 1 frame, you fall. Now, you can mitigate that by speeding it up, but if you speed it up too much, you'll dash. So there's a rhythm to it. It's a rhythm, and once you get the rhythm, it's guaranteed. The thing is, if you practice for hovering in practice, and you do all these things, these hover tests I was talking about, either the application that you can download, the distance, speed, or time, hovering for any one of those periods is completely worthless, because those do not actually test what the game is looking for. What is Link to the Past looking for a hover? I think it's 28 pixels, and I heard it's 28 frames, but that would mean 28 pixels. Oh, yeah, it is 28. It is 28 pixels, because it's actually more than that. Interesting. Yeah, it's 28 frame perfect inputs for the hover, but at the bottom and the top of the hover, it's three tiles. But at the bottom and the top, you can actually go to the edge of the tile, so it's actually more than 28 inputs. It's more than that, interestingly. See, that's something that's never been thought about. When people think of hovering, they think of 28 frame perfect inputs. But that's not true in a real-time run, because in a real-time run, you can never start the hover on the frame perfectly, and you can never end it frame perfectly. You can end it late, and I'm going to go into that, it's tricky. And you can start it late too, but you don't want to start it late. So it's usually going to be like 30 or 40 frame perfect inputs. And the thing is, if you miss a few of the frame perfect inputs, like you do chains of 0, let's say you do 7 chains of 0 in a row, and then you do a chain of 1, and then a chain of 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, you're fine. If you do like 0, 0, 0, 0, 2, 1, you actually would fall on 2. And you can't do 31 zeros in a row. You'd have to eventually do a 1. So those are 1 frame. That's frame by frame, 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 frame. So you'd have to, it's very fast. The habit is very fast. In practice, let's say you hover for 7 minutes straight. The requirements for hovering for 7 minutes straight are very different than hovering, let's say 40 pixels at the end of a run on PB Pace when there's Moldorm on the screen. Completely different things. So what people do is they're practicing hovering. They want results because they want to look good. That's what ego is. They want the results to make themselves look good. This is how they're solving the problem. Can I hover or not? How do I hover? How do we solve the problem? We're going to do it through output. So they pick what test makes them look the best. So these things evolve over time. And the more I talk about it too, I think people start to figure this stuff out, which is good. But it's interesting. When I talk about this stuff, people used to always reset. Then I started talking about doing no resets because it's kind of a meta thing. People started doing no resets. Now I go. It's actually, there's advantages to resetting. You'll see people start resetting. It's funny, but yeah. So in a hover, when you're on PB Pace, there's these anxiety factors that come up. So there's several anxiety factors that come up. One, there's a Moldorm behind you, so you have to actually dodge out Moldorm. So to dodge out Moldorm, you have to be able to read his RNGs. So reading his RNGs actually makes the room more natural, which is interesting. This is also, again, why natural gameplay is so powerful, because everything matters. Suddenly everything matters, because something might make it more or less natural. So what I do for the hover is I sequence it. So I dash down and then dash. I walk down and then dash down and then dash right. Right? Why do I do that? Because it's sequencing it. It breaks this hover down into 2 sets of information. It's faster to walk diagonal. So I said you walk down, then dash right, then dash down. It's actually faster to walk diagonal. Problem is when you walk diagonal, there's more information chains, or there's more information like chains and sequences. So it's not as natural, even though it's faster. Well, I would say it's slower in real time, because guess what? You can't do that stuff in real time, or it doesn't work. It doesn't effectively work. So the dashing is really good, but and this, I guess, why natural gameplay is so cool. But anyway, yeah. So you have to. So the reason I dash down, you can check where Moldorm is, and then you dash right. And if he's on the right, you can hover down the left. If he's on the left, you can hover on the right. Right. So it's 2 sequence chains, or it's 2 information sequences instead of like 4 or 5 or whatever. The diagonal one's a lot. Diagonal one's awful. I don't know how people do that. They don't. I do know how, because they fail it. Okay, so you go into the hover. There's an interesting thing about hovering. If you're falling off the edge, so the way holes work in Link to the Past is you can be on the very last pixel. If you press the direction away from the hole, you'll get back on land. Like you're only falling in Link to the Past when you're actually in the falling animation. You'll never fall off. You can always turn around, which is cool. But you have to start hovering before you start falling, because you can't dash while you're falling. So you have to start hovering before you're falling. Okay, so you can't hover at the bottom of the ledge. Number 2, Moldorm will eventually aggro at you, so you can't sit there forever. Okay, I think this is the main ones. Number 3, yeah, if you miss an input, you fall. And then the way you hover too is very specific to your fingers. So the way I hover is I actually have my 2 fingernails. They're gonna cross the A button. You want the fingernail to actually touch the A button, and then it has to completely cross over the next A button. Every time it does that, you're gonna go over the A button. So in between my fingers, my thumb right now, that's the size of the A button. So it's gonna continuously go over it, and every time it touches the other nail, I'm gonna go 1 pixel. So if you can keep this grip really tight, you actually can reliably hover, right? So that's how I hover, right? So hovering long distances is actually very difficult for me, because it's hard to keep the grip. It's actually pretty hard to keep that grip for a long period of time, right? Eventually something's gonna shake. So talking to someone is very difficult. Hovering long distances is very difficult. Hovering for a very long period of time is very difficult. And hovering fast is not something I consider, right? Because let's say you're minus 15 on your PB, or let's say you're minus 4 on your PB, or plus 4, you could save 4. Yeah, how about this? This happens all the time in runs. You're plus 4 on your PB, you can save 4 seconds in Ganon's tower, and you can save 1 second in Ganon, and you can hover, and you have to hover and save that time. What are you gonna do? You're gonna hover, and you're extremely nervous. So the way I hover is very effective for that. The way other people hover, it doesn't account for that. I wouldn't say it's not effective for it, it just doesn't account for anything I talked about right there. It accounts for distance, it accounts for speed, it accounts for practice, optimizing room times. Like the people who have the best room times on hovering, they don't have anywhere near my achievements with hovering, anywhere near it. They just don't account for it. Are you trying to get a room time in hovering? You have to walk diagonal, you have to hover ASAP, and then you have to hover very, very fast. That's what you have to do when you're doing a room time. I'll never do that. So I'm never gonna get top room times. Well, the room times things it's just ego. It's completely ego. Now, you could argue room times are more important than PB and Link to the Past, and I think that's fair. I think if you made that argument, it's fair, shoot for it. Like, I think it's great. A lot of people do base their reality off that. I really think it's fine, but nobody really believes that, like, internally. I think people are just lying themselves on that one. Like, I do think speedrunning is kind of arbitrary. The goal system's a little bit arbitrary, but internally, everybody cares about, people care about 120 star in Mario. There's reasons for that. Nobody cares about, like, single segment times. Nobody cares about most tasking achievements. Not to hate on taskers, but it's not a clean display of execution under pressure. And that's a skill that people have given a lot of stock into. Humanity's given that skill a lot of stock into. So you'll see people task out room times, or get these crazy room times just in mechanically, like in human RTA or whatever. Not in runs, but in, like, practice. But this is basically ego. This is ego. Then they'll say they're good. Then the problem here is they'll either say they're good, or they are presenting that they're good at the game, or they're presenting that they understand the hover. Like that doesn't make any sense to me. Like, let's say you hover everywhere around the Moldorm 2 arena, and then you why else would you do that other than to present that you're good at it? Because if you were like me, you would never go for that, because it's actually bad. It's hurting your game. You're becoming a worse at the game by doing that. I was talking about that earlier. So I would never do that. So I think I'm presenting that I'm good at hovering as well, but in runs, successfully in runs, right? Go figure. So I would think it has to be a presentation of I am mechanically good at this. I understand this well, but they clearly don't understand it. Also, I'm going to end this video here, but think about everything I said. Everything I said is gameplay optimization, and absolutely none of it is mechanical. Everything I said is gameplay optimization, and everything I said is achievable by virtually anybody. And it's all philosophy. It's all mental. It's all principle. And that's why I'm a better player than everyone else who plays Link to the Past. It almost has nothing to do with mechanical achievements. Now, my mechanics are unbelievably insane in Link to the Past. But Zelda's are too, but it's through the mind. It's through figuring out what is value, targeting the value system, and creating gameplay around the value system, and then capitalizing on the value system. And you have other players, like let's go back to the hovering example, they're not capitalizing on the value system that the game cares about. They're capitalizing on the value system that their own game cares about. Hovering for 2 minutes straight, not a value system in the game. It actually requires different skill set than hovering across the Molder Pit. It has no value in the game. So why would you practice the Molder Hover if you're doing that? They're completely different things. That's why I call it ego. That is like, the thing about natural gameplay, it's hard to explain in 1 hour. It's hard to explain in 30 hours. Well, actually, maybe in 30 hours is enough. It's literally a completely different way of thinking about gameplay and optimization. Everything has to be reworked. That's like a drop. Actually, it's a pretty big drop in the pond of gameplay optimization that we're going to go into. Think about this a lot. This stuff's insane. These ideas, these concepts, these principles, this is how you break through your mind. This is how you break through your barriers. We're going to talk about these principles for the rest of the year. These concepts, these principles, they're the most essential things to this group, to natural gameplay, to real gameplay optimization, mental gameplay optimization. Really reaching the limits of gameplay. We're going to go over that. Anyway, peace out, gamers.